I remember, reading Dr. Seuss with my dad and being amazed at the rhymes and the play with the language. And from there, I moved on to things like Edgar Allan Poe or Rubén Darío, the Latin American modernistas. So it was a fascination with form and the sonic possibilities of language, where it initially comes from. Often to humorous effect, and so that connects with the comedy. But at a primal level, it has to do more with language and with any interest in performance or any political slant at that level. It's about throwing together disparate elements. That's where form comes in. That's why I'm interested in things like cool logic. You see it has those fixed quatrains, or in the Lógica Cool, the Spanish version, you have the use of the décima. I guess it's sort of the cliched, popular poetic form, and that interested me at some point. Following a Puerto Rican poet named José Ramón Meléndez. He has a book in the 70s called Decimos Décimas. We say décimas. And it's a very irreverent and very politically charged refashioning of the décima, but reflecting not so much the idealized rural Puerto Rico, but the sort of funky, gritty, urban Puerto Rico. And so I took that and said, wow, I can actually even adapt this one step further, with my sort of culturally overloaded and sort of hyped up and very parody-driven style. And so inspired by that, I started doing the décimas and wearing the pava, the straw hat, and the typical Jíbaro shirts, and that was sort of my shtick when I started out in Puerto Rico. So form is a way to fix all these disparate elements that are all over the place, and sort of it's up to the reader to say, how do I make cool logic out of this? What is the logic of this apparently sort of arbitrary or random catalog? I guess catalog is a good way of putting it. That's one thing that I think readers will notice as they take a look at the book, is the commitment to form, even if it's sloppy form, even if it's, for example, a sonnet like Death and Taxes. It's totally prosaic and totally unpoetic in terms of what it's talking about, but the form is a sonnet form. So recasting those traditional, really tired and belabored forms like decimas and sonnets into contemporary idiom and seeing, does it survive? Will it sound pretentious? Will it be hokey? Will it be fun? Can you have fun with that kind of stuff? We'll see, but that's an important part of my work. If I had to describe my style, I'd say I'm aiming towards a sort of pop modernism, which sounds totally paradoxical because modernism, we think of like high modernism and like high experiments in art, and pop is the opposite. But I think if you actually read some of the key modernist texts, if you read, for example, T.S. Eliot's Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, for example, that's a poem which is, has the sort of the chanty, sort of almost, throwaway pop refrain, let us go then, you and I. And Rubén Darío is great at that. He has his poem called Divagación, sort of, I guess, is wandering across these mental, formal landscapes. In Spectrax, for example, you probably have no idea who Pablo de Roca is. A Chile, really hyper-obscure Chilean avant-garde poet. But you probably guess from the rest of the poem what the spirit of the poem is, even if you don't necessarily understand all the reference. So again, in the case of a poem like Pills and Booze, actually that took me forever to write. That's probably the poem I've most struggled with in my life. There were about 15 drafts of that poem because I was trying to make it sound natural, like somebody talking to himself, which is what the poem is about. It's describing, my personality, and it couldn't sound belabored or awkward or overdone formally. So like 15 drafts of it, trying to get it just right, and also writing. In English, you can't write syllabically. Rhyme poetry in Spanish is syllabic, and in English you have to count, stressed feet and unstressed feet and all that. So that was really new to me also. So there's, I think, a feeling of discovery in the book. It's biographical. It's based on my trying to figure out how to do all these things that I was interested in Spanish, but now in English, dealing with a new language, a new vocabulary, and a new social context and political reality. To me, it's more important not so much whether I'm writing in English or in Spanish or a mix of both, than where I'm writing from in terms of my personal imaginary. Some poems like En los suburbios lejanos, for example, are clearly written not from New York, either from Puerto Rico or from California. There's a distance there. It's written about places where I'm no longer at. Versus, for example, Nursing Home Injuries, which is an outsider looking into, specifically that's about East Harlem. I was hanging out in East Harlem just trying to describe the scene around me in as mysterious terms as I could.